I want to show you something, but don't get too excited. It's just an ordinary crumpled paper ball. In fact, its meaning and value are so insignificant, it's actually worth more in the trash than in my hand. But had that been just one of over 150 paper balls that make up work number 88 by the artist Martin Creed, that would have just been a massive error in judgment, because those paper balls, individually residing in the context of prestigious galleries, museums, and private collections around the world, well, they can range anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000 in value. And yet, that is nothing compared to Rabbit, a 3-foot stainless steel mirror-finished sculpture of an inflatable bunny. Jeff Koons produced the work in an edition of 3, one of which set the record in 2019 for the highest price ever paid at auction for a living artist's work, $91.1 million. To put that number into context, Taylor Swift's 11,000 square foot Beverly Hills Goldwyn estate, which, sidebar, was built by Samuel Goldwyn. He's the G in MGM Films. Zillow has that property valued at a third of Rabbit's, $30.6 million. But this isn't just going to be about art. It's about life and how we create meaning and value within this absurdly brief window of time. I'm the artist ATB, but I haven't always been. Before I became the creator of a singular, lifelong work of art called Sold, I was just Adam Taylor Brown. That all changed on June 20th, 2021, my birthday. Also Father's Day, which is a little synchronicity that happens once, maybe twice a decade. That year, I turned 36, and it was the first time I fully embraced that sooner or later, I was going to die. For you to understand why, though, I do need to give you a little bit more context. In fact, I need to take you back to 1993, because 1993 is the first time Father's Day and my birthday shared a date on the calendar. I was turning 8, and my dad and I had planned an entire weekend together with my mom, beginning with a Friday afternoon swim at a neighbor's pool. When we got there, though, I realized I'd forgotten my goggles. So my dad goes back to get them, and when he returns, I'm standing on the diving board. And it's from this vantage point that I watch him jog up along the side of the pool, pull off his shirt, and dive in to swim my goggles to me. That's about how long it was before I watched his body float to the surface, face down, motionless. He was instantly paralyzed with a bleak prognosis. The doctor said he would be a full quadriplegic for the rest of his life, which they generously estimated would be up to about 10 years. He was only 36. Now, for those of you who have yet to have your own existential encounter with mortality, here's what happens at a practical level. You become an accountant. You take stock of the value of your time, that which you've already spent and that which you might have left to spend. I've been spending mine in service of other people's ambitions as a brand strategist and designer, but believe me when I tell you, this was not the original plan. I grew up preparing for a career in the arts. I even had a brief stint at a theater school in London before jettisoning it all in exchange for that siren song of adulthood, job stability. So, that's why, when I turned 36, I made what can only be characterized as a brazenly unhinged decision. I decided I was finally going to become an artist. But I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. How does one become an artist, let alone at the age of 36? It would take me another 2 years for me to find my voice, and just as importantly, my medium. During that time, I met with art world inhabitants, I read dozens of books, I listened to hundreds of podcasts, and watched just as many hours of video. If you asked me to tell you what I learned in the briefest possible of sentences, it would be this. The art world is a contextual playground completely untethered from reality. It is an intersubjective network in which success isn't actually predicated on talent, but something else. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to show you what that something else is as we take a brief tour back in time through a little art history, beginning with 1991. Advertising legend Charles Saatchi has just given the young British artist Damien Hirst carte blanche to create anything his heart desires. So naturally, Hirst commissions an Australian fisherman to catch a tiger shark for 6,000 pounds, which he then submerges in a 4,360-gallon tank of formaldehyde. Saatchi will eventually sell this shark about 13 years later for a reported $12 million, and at the time, that's the highest price ever paid for a living artist's work, save for Jasper Johns. But, and I cannot stress this enough, it is just a shark. In fact, it's not even the original. The first shark decayed so far beyond repair that it eventually had to be replaced. But with a title like The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something even more. Next up, 1962. Andy Warhol, a commercial artist turned fine artist, has just shown his 32 paintings of Campbell's soup cans in his first one-man gallery exhibition. Now, Andy's career is going to be defined by breaking convention, whether it's his interpolation of everyday products into fine art or the mass production of his own artwork. Literally everything this man touches is gonna be imbued with his cult of celebrity, and not just in the art world, but in the world at large as well. 1917. Ladies and gentlemen, the most over-discussed work of art in the history of talking about art. It's Marcel Duchamp's porcelain urinal titled Fountain. He submits the work to the inaugural exhibition of the Society of Independent Artists, but we don't get to see it. That's because it's never placed in the viewing area based on the jury's assessment that it doesn't actually qualify as real art. Later on, explaining the concept of ready-mades, Duchamp will describe them as everyday objects raised to the dignity of a work of art by the artist's act of choice. We have finally arrived in the 1800s, and everyone in this room is going to recognize most of the following names: Pissarro, Sicily, Renoir, Degas, Cézanne, Manet, Monet. That's because these 7 guys represent the core of the French Impressionist canon. If there is one French Impressionist, I'd wager not many people in this room will recognize, and that is Gustave Caillebotte. Now, Caillebotte is not just an artist, he's also a collector of the Impressionists. These are his friends and contemporaries at a time when the art establishment roundly rejects their aesthetics. Now, unfortunately, Caillebotte is going to die of a stroke at the age of 46 in 1894, but not before willing his art collection to the French state, stipulating its exhibition at the Musée du Luxembourg in Paris. This is a bold and presumptuous move, which, as you might imagine, does not go over particularly well. It's going to take the state a few years to relent, but once it does, crowds will flock to see what all the fuss was about. Turns out the 7 most famous French Impressionists owe their success not just to their avant-garde, dreamy aesthetics, but to the single posthumous bequest of a man who literally platformed them into the annals of art history. Last but not least, this lady needs no introduction. The Mona Lisa by DaVinci has been regarded as a great work of art since before it was even finished in 1503. But it's not the most valuable or the most famous work in the Louvre, let alone the world, until August 21st, 1911. That's the day the Mona Lisa is stolen. And as the news media begins to propagate its image around the world, people literally begin to queue up for a look at the space on the wall where the painting once hung. The thief is Vincenzo Peruggi. He's an Italian immigrant to France and a maintenance worker at the Louvre. He and a couple co-conspirators remove the painting from the wall, hid in a closet overnight, and then absconded with it the next morning as patrons filled the galleries. Upon its return, a couple years later, the world has become irreversibly obsessed with the Mona Lisa's enigmatic smile. Or, if we're willing to be a little more honest and pull a little bit further back, the international art heist that made her smile inescapable. Do you see it yet? Because if you're looking too close at the art objects, you are missing out on so much of the art. More than its mediums and materials, art's actual meaning and value is the product of its context. And the same is true for artists, by the way. I realized very quickly I did not fit the art world's conventional context. I was the wrong age, living in the wrong city with the wrong degree, and most importantly, I had the wrong connections. I could do everything by the book, and I was still going to fail as an artist. So I decided I would take a page from my own instead. I decided I would create my own context, which is something my dad had done 30 years earlier. Sometime after his accident in 1993, my dad would tell me a story about his first few days at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. This was right after his head had literally been bolted inside a stabilizing halo and he had been attached to a ventilator. Unable to speak or move, he said he did the only thing he could. He prayed, but he prayed for death. If this is all that life had left to offer him, then he didn't want to live it anymore. And then he says he thought of his 8-year-old son. He thought of me. And he asked himself, well, what if he could actually get the next 10 years? He'd be able to finish raising me, get me through high school, off to college, and on my way to being an adult. My dad, he took his remaining life as a fully dependent, wheelchair-bound quadriplegic, recontextualized it, and created a reason to live where seconds earlier there had been none. That's how he did it. That's how he created meaning and value in his life. Context. It's how I would create meaning and value in my art 30 years later. I've made context itself the medium. And for us, there is no greater context than time. That is the thesis at the heart of Sold, my lifelong time-based work of art. Sold's primary context is how it comes into and leaves the world. It's released in waves of 12 identical prints called works. Each time one sells, the next one doubles in value. So the first work in any wave is only ever a few dollars, but by the 12th, it can soar into the 5 and eventually 6 figures. But, and this is the most important part, they're only available for 12 days. Any work that doesn't sell within that window must be destroyed in the recorded performance of a wake. Like us, these waves die, many without ever reaching their potential. That's why the first work sold in every wave receives a birthmark, the 12th a life mark, and in the event not every work sells, then the last work to have sold receives a death mark. So, what's more valuable? Is it a work from a wave in which the 12th sold for thousands of dollars? Or is it a work from a wave cut dramatically short, making the remaining works that much more rare? Is it more valuable to have acquired a work early in the wave when it was much more affordable but under a much higher demand, or a work from later in the wave which was exceedingly expensive but never promised to begin with? What if the wave is installed in an abandoned downtown Starbucks? What if the wave generates a media controversy for its use of AI image generation? What if all 12 works from the wave are installed in a luxury Airbnb, costing guests over $1,000 a night just to see it? But proceeds from that wave go to benefit homelessness intervention. what if the wave becomes a platform for the construction of a real-life time machine? Because that's what happened with Wave 7, Take Your Time. I built the Ion. It's a temporal perception device that takes your time and opens a series of windows such that you can interact and observe your immediate past selves. Now, if you remember, I told you at the very beginning that this wasn't just going to be about art. What I didn't tell you is that it's been the art the whole time. Is this paper ball still a piece of trash? Maybe it's something else now. Maybe it's something even more. Because over the last few minutes, it's become the subject of a wave that won't open for 36 months from April 12th, 2024 at 11:37:03 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's called The Prestige. Now, my dad, he pulled off one hell of a magic trick. He took the 10 years the doctors gave him, and he invested those into the people closest to him. He eventually found a way to take care of us. And in return, he got 12 more than he was due. Philip Herman Brown passed away in 2015, 22 years after his tragic accident. There is no greater context than time. For us, it is a finite window with an indefinite end, and we say we spend our time, but time is not a currency. The accounting is a paradox. When we spend our wealth, our balance is less, but with time, the more we spend, the more valuable our remainder becomes. I'm the artist ATB. This and this, all of this, is sold. Thank you.